Good afternoon once again. Welcome to the very last session this afternoon. We're running a little bit late, but this final session is very important and I know you'll enjoy it. This is the road ahead, the next step. So I'll ask all of our speakers to come and take a seat. And so far we have heard from many informed speakers sharing their experiences and new thinking with us and challenging ideas about heritage and the role that it can play in tourism. Our final session of the symposium draws together these ideas and hopefully creates new ones for us all to consider, to contribute to, and perhaps even to action when we return to our offices and homes and communities. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage for conversation 4 panel members who represent organisations which deliver services, have infrastructure or have strategic interest in regional Queensland heritage or tourism and can play a key role in contributing to a stronger heritage tourism experience throughout Queensland and into the future. And you met earlier Jane Cowell from the State Library of Queensland and Therese Phillips from TEQ, but I'd also like to introduce our other guests. We've got on the end Stewart Armstrong, joined the National Trust of Queensland as an Executive Officer in 2006. Stewart is a registered architect who's been specialising in heritage in Queensland for over 15 years, working for private practices, the Queensland Government and now the National Trust, a community heritage organisation. Since joining the Trust, Stewart has been involved in a range of activities and projects promoting heritage conservation and tourism through Queensland, including as an inaugural member of the organising committee for Brisbane Open House that we've heard so much about today, Director of Brisbane Living Heritage Network, Great Houses of Ipswich Project, Spring Hill Reservoirs Reuse Project, the Queensland Government's Board for Urban Places, the Lord Mayor's Save City Hall Committee and the Indonesian Australian Heritage Organisations Partnership. So thank you, Stewart, for being here today. Also, I'd like to introduce Rebekah Butler, the Executive Director of Museum and Gallery Services Queensland, the peak professional body for Queensland public museum and gallery sector. She has more than 18 years' experience working in the public gallery and visual arts sector, including as Director of the Broken Hill Regional Art Gallery, New South Wales, and Director of Umbrella Studio Contemporary Arts in Townsville. Rebekah has contributed to an extensive range of industry reference groups, boards and steering committees, written for various publications and been an arts correspondent for 6:30 local ABC Radio North Queensland. Before we kick off these questions, I'd just like to ask Jane, wanted to talk about the playback session that we almost saw before, Jane.
So I thought it'd be really interesting to show you the playback in the future session, simply because it is about digitisation. So the playback project was funded by the State Library of Queensland grant round called Opal, and we worked with 7 organisations to digitise 80 hours of oral histories, and each of the participating organisations got their digitised audio histories and then were able to get funding to actually create a local project that promoted their local history through the oral histories. And what we want to show you, and we hope that it works now, is one of those local projects from Townsville, and to show you how the heritage can be used as an online tool to engage your community with your heritage. So we can but hope. Everybody cross everything.
Townsville Voices is an audio collection of memories of Townsville. Exploring the collection allows you to understand how Townsville locals experience significant and everyday events in their lives. Listen as they share their memories of life in our changing community.
The war started in 1939. Well, it didn't affect Australia much then until around about 1942 when the Americans started to arrive in Townsville. I don't know how we found out about it, but we knew the American ships, they call them landing barges, the front of the barge flops down and they just run trucks off and everything like that. And that was where the rock pool is now. And there was 3 side by side that come in there and drop the front and unload whatever it was, 10-wheeler big trucks, GMC trucks or Jeeps, or they were driving real slow. We'd jump on the back and ride them for about 100 yards and go back and get the next one as it came up the beach.
Well, my shed disappeared. and that was mainly my own fault, and I won't go into that. And we lost the barbecue roof. I think the tanks went rolling down the street, never to be seen again. There used to be a road in front of those houses once. It's not there now. And it was covered in sand. The whole of sand come up right up to the front of the houses there. It was pretty scary for them.
And I can still remember when I was small having to be hidden. We'd get word that there's a government person coming out to see whether Gran has been looking after us properly. Oh, there's quite a few of us used to run out and lay down in the long guinea grass, and we could hear what this person was saying. Where are the children? I'd like to see them. Oh, they're down the river playing somewhere, because we knew what his intentions were. If he didn't like what he saw, he would have grabbed us and taken us and put us away on one of these institutions like Palm Island. So it wasn't very good, and we had to keep on our toes all the time.
During the war years, there was manpower, as they called it, and they ordered you to work. And I was 16 only. Labour was short everywhere, you know. First of all, I went to Woolworths as a shop assistant, and I got 17 and sixpence a week. So then I tried to get a more profitable job, and I went to the northern manufacturers, made tins for the meatworks, for the tinned meat, you know. But after 6 weeks, my hands were bleeding. All these little cuts, even though I wore gloves. Hands were so sore I had to go and resign.
I can remember Corbett's waterhole. It was just a big waterhole in the river. We used to drive our bullocks from home down along Fivehead Creek and cross the Corbett's waterhole and come down along Ross River Road. This is back in the early 40s. And we'd go across to where Mount St John Zoo was. We used to generally sell our cattle to old St John Robinson there. He had the zoo there, and that's where we deliver the bullocks.
These have been just a sample of the stories that are available through the Townsville Voices collection. To hear extended interviews from these and other Townsville voices, get in touch with the Townsville Library or ask one of our staff the next time you visit your local branch.
I'll ask a few questions, but I would love to hear from any of you if you have any questions of our panel, or indeed of Andrew and Tony, who you didn't get the opportunity to ask questions of before. But the fellas are there, and I'm sure they're more than happy to take any questions. But we might just start with you, Stewart, because we haven't heard from you that much before. But I wanted to ask all of you what you think, what you feel the drivers for heritage tourism in Queensland are.
On the positive side, I think it's, as we heard, there's a lot of local passion, and I think that underpins a lot of those things. But I think the other driver at the moment is financial sustainability, because a lot of heritage places find it difficult, and trying to promote themselves better and run as a better business and attract more visitors, it attracts some more money, and it makes in theory, makes their place a bit more sustainable.
And we spoke before about the value of partnerships, and is that a potential way to overcome those financial issues?
Partnerships is an enormous topic, and I think we talked about partnerships of funding, as Tom mentioned, but I think there's partnerships across our sector is something that we haven't really explored yet. And I can just see, wouldn't it be wonderful in a regional area where the state library, or the local library like Townsville has an oral history presentation. There's a heritage place down the road where the interpretation there links back to that one, and then there's the Indigenous Cultural Centre down the road a bit further, when all that interpretation is linked together, and a visitor feels like he's got to go to all those to get the whole story. I
heard someone say at another event recently that collaboration is the new competition, which really, struck a chord with me, that, you don't have to, you might be in a similar industry, but you'll get a lot further if you work together. Rebekah, can I ask you about what you feel the drivers for heritage tourism may be in Queensland?
I think one of the challenges, just following on from what Stewart was saying, is also for our sector in particular, it's largely operated by volunteers, which is an ageing demographic, and I think there's capacity to have paid staffing in some of these community volunteer-run museums, and to be able to keep the doors open on regular hours, that's also hugely beneficial. There's over 400 museums and galleries in Queensland, and they've all got collections of local, state, and in some instances national significance with great stories to tell. And I think if there's ways and means of better marketing and promoting these, and also working with their regional tourist operators to communicate that story, or as you were saying about improving the connectivity of those networks within their regions and potentially across the state, that would also benefit them.
The issue of volunteers has come up a couple of times today, isn't it? So, I mean, you mentioned that their volunteers are generally older people and they're ageing. So how do you get younger people to put their hand up and want to help?
I think that is one of the challenges. I don't know that I have the right answer. There are younger people volunteering through internships and other placements through their university studies. Some are engaging through digital media, sharing their expertise with those museums that they may be working with. But it is a challenge for the sector, and how you deliver public programming that targets and engages that audience, so that hopefully they become very enthusiastic and that next ambassadors for the sector, and in promoting them to not only their community but also visitors to the region.
I think one of the key components that needs to change, and it's something the State Library's working on ourselves, is to engage younger people. You actually need to give them agency. You need to give them decision-making power. And it's very hard for cultural institutions to give up some of that control. So if we allow young people to organise an event that interests them within, because they are interested in heritage, culture, connections to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, we need to actually hand over the reins. And yes, you still work within a structure and you can do that, but sort of to have them engage and they learn things and they get a reference because they've organised an event, sort of they've participated, and they will get heaps of young people in through their own networks. And a postcard or a brochure doesn't work in today's world. Like we heard that 67% of decision making is made on word of mouth, so it is about sharing. But we have to give up control in today's world with volunteers. They need agency, they need to know that they're valued, and we need to work with the community. We don't do it to them and we don't do it for them, we work with them and allow them to engage. And I really liked one of Tom's notion that we no longer look inward, we have to look outward. The driver of heritage tourism is because there is a market. There is a market because people are interested in who we are. So there's an absolute market out there. We just need to be better at meeting that market.
Just on the note of young people engaging, we recently had Joanne Orr, the CEO of Museums Galleries Scotland, visiting and presenting as a speaker, and they have a fantastic program in the UK called Takeover Day, where kids actually come in and they're the curator, they're the front of house person, they're the registrar, and they get this first-hand experience of how a museum or gallery operates. And it's a really rewarding experience for them, but also the staff involved in those institutions.
Yeah, so it's about participation, not consumerism. So they don't want to just consume content, they want to participate.
On a personal note, I did take my kids to the behind-the-scenes tour of the museum, which was... They thought it was unbelievable. Like this, they felt like they were, and we spoke about this earlier as well, they felt like they were getting something that nobody else was. So they were part of a secret club. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful idea. Can I bring you in, Therese, at this point? What do you see is essential at this point to create a strong future for heritage tourism?
A couple of things. I think one thing is we need to focus. One of the worst things is for everyone to try and be everything to everyone. So it's much better if you have a special story to focus on your special story. one of the things, and I'll probably put off a few more people in the audience when I say this, but as you drive through Western Queensland, you go past a lot of collectibles, collection houses, museums, where everything from, and the one I'm thinking more particularly is Mary Kathleen. So everything that ever lived in Mary Kathleen is in that beautiful museum, to the point that you can't actually get to the front door. You've got to motor your way through. And it's so exhausting. So it doesn't lend itself to a good experience because there's just too much stuff.
Too confusing.
Absolutely. So I think everyone needs to focus down on what their special bit of their world is all about and promote it. Make it the thing that people want to take with them because that's what they're going to connect to. And
what about focusing on an audience? Should you be thinking, okay, this is my target market, I should focus in on them, or be everything to as many as possible?
Well, each of the regions have their own audience pool. So if we go back to what we call the outback, what other people call Western Queensland, the majority of people driving up those roads during our winter are actually from northern New South Wales, Sydney and its in surrounds, Melbourne and 400 k's around it. That's the majority of the people who are driving up that road. So if you can think about what they're looking for, and that was that list of dot points I had about people wanting to connect, yes, with their heritage, but not necessarily heritage that they have. So that's one. In addition to that, you've got your special interest groups. So for all of the people who run steam train heritage events and have museums, look, there are hundreds of people who just live for steam trains and the heritage impact behind it. Other people won't care. So you either focus down on the niche from where you come, so from what your specialty is, or you look to the audience that's going to come to your region anyway and say, well, what do I have that might be of interest to that audience? All of that audience profile is available up on our website. We know who come to places, so we can help you understand who's going to be there. And if you could focus in your offering so that you're going to hit their buttons, then you'll find that people will repeat. So they'll talk about you on their social media and they'll tell other people and you'll become a must-do.
So I'd say by this point everyone has an online identity or brand, but how in-depth do you think that has to be? Do you have to show everything that you're doing, or just how important is that?
Yeah, I differ with a lot of my colleagues on this one. We've just, if you didn't probably know, Google have just released a virtual trip of the Great Barrier Reef. You know, you can do a virtual trip around the Eiffel Tower, you can do a virtual trip of the Louvre. I think if you put everything on the website, people don't need to come. Now, I'm different. A lot of other people bag me out on my opinion on that one, but to me, you don't give all of your secrets away on your web presence. You need to give a taste so that people read it and think, whoa, now that's somewhere I need to be. That's just my personal opinion, though.
And because that now means apps, and it's more than just a website, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's lots of technology and a lot of time-wasting and money-wasting technology, unfortunately. I mean, the example from Maryborough where they've got the geocodes, there's one of our digital specialists who work who hates geocodes, absolutely with a passion. There's another one who works in the same office with him that would think they're the only things you can do. So far be it from me, who is basically a dinosaur, to say which one is the right way. But you have to look at your own resources and decide who you can link in with. And I think this comes back to the effort of, the Department of Heritage have apps and they have ways of displaying information. Your local councils will. So I would hate to see people put a lot of money into developing up brand new things unless they had a lot of money behind that they couldn't be spending on something else.
We've got some questions at this point because we could talk all day among ourselves. Yes, there's a question. If you could just stand up, please, and introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. I'm Suze. I'm from the Abbey Museum and a number of other things. I definitely, I hear what you're saying, Therese, but this is like a very key passion project of mine. And I'm so excited, and thank you, Rebekah, and to the organisers for bringing in events and tourism people and heritage together. It's phenomenal. I really do think that the opportunity is there for all the 400 galleries in Queensland to actually leverage off
Oh, now that's harsh. I'll let Chris Chambers know that he owes you big time because you've just used 4 of his favourite words.
Does anyone have a response or? No?
I think it's a wonderful idea, and like it is about putting all of the stuff in the one place instead of you trying to have a website that is another destination in that thing that is the internet. Sort of so much new stuff goes up all the time, and unless you know how to Googleize your website, it's not going to come up first in the first set of 10. I think, and not all small organisations can have a good website. So I think having a platform where you can share your content is a great way to go.
Any other questions?
Can I just add one little addition? Okay. ATDW, and I've said it 4 or 5 times already, it's the one database that everyone feeds from. So if your information is on Australian Tourism Data Warehouse, then you'll be picked up even if you don't do anything. And it's definitely versions of that. So we, Tourism Events Queensland, have just released our calendar program called It's Live. It's our events program. Any event in Queensland can be registered on It's Live as long as you're on ATDW. Does it mean you're going to get journalists coming up? No, not necessarily, but it could, because that's where all of the teams are trawling through to see what's actually happening. So the one thing you should be is on ATDW, because that's where Tourism Australia and that's where Tourism Events Queensland and that's where your regional tourism organisations all draw their information from.
Can I ask can you say, what is AT?
ATDW.
ATDW. Who's on ATDW?
Few. Yeah.
Another question?
Yes, hello. I'm Ian from the Queensland Maritime Museum. Two things for you. In the 2 weeks leading up to G20, we had almost no visitors to the museum. And in fact, one little interesting story, on the Tuesday prior to the G20, at one stage we had a gentleman from India come in. And he had flown from India specifically to visit our museum. And he was only in Brisbane one day before going to South Australia. And his visit was fabulous, but he was the only person in the museum. And he was horrified and couldn't believe the situation and ended up speaking to me personally about it. But he offered this piece of advice. He said you should get the government to make it compulsory for people to visit these places. So I throw that to the panel. We need to make it compulsory for people to visit heritage places, and I think the government's got to take some steps in that regard.
I think the Department of Heritage need to take that one as a to-do list.
But the other one that really intrigued me, and again I'd be interested in the comment, is some of you may have seen it a couple of weeks ago. The Weekend Australian produced a magazine on culture in Australia for 2015. So it was across nationally, listing all of the cultural activities that are happening in Australia in 2015. How much heritage was in that magazine?
How much?
Nil. So the people that must have fed that information into the Weekend Australian, I imagine, were out of the arts departments in each of the states, would be my guess. And yet we just have no profile. And I really think that's a crying shame that at some level in government, heritage has absolutely zero profile when it comes to culture. We just, they put us in the cultural and heritage sector because that's convenient, but we don't really exist in the forefront of the minds of the key decision makers.
Do you think there's a perception that heritage isn't sexy enough?
Well, I think that's probably part of it, yes.
Yeah. I think it falls through the gaps too often. You know, it doesn't sit neatly, cultural heritage doesn't sit neatly within the heritage environment portfolio, and it's just starting to be talked about at a state level within Arts Queensland about cultural heritage, and at a federal level it's also slipping through the gaps, unfortunately. So we just have to keep banging on that door and talking up the great value of cultural heritage.
So is that what it's about, banging on the door and keep telling the stories and keep reminding people and reminding government?
About the value.
That was, reminding...
So cultural heritage is more than the built environment. Yes.
You've got a microphone, Tom? Yes.
Thank you. First of all, the UK did make it compulsory for education students to visit heritage places, and it's easier to push for the education, i.e. the new national curriculum, to incorporate a visit on an annual basis to a heritage place. And there are models throughout Europe that is mandatory in all public education programs, and it's highly successful. But in regarding the last issue, we're our own, we have everything to blame ourselves. Cultural heritage isn't sexy, it's not important, it's not a vote getter, and the reason is because we have lacked the leadership to take it to that next level. It's nobody else's fault but our own. We have not demonstrated that it is worthy of an investment. Until such time that we can identify and capture the values, i.e. economic and social and environmental, it will never be a successful program in this country.
That's a bit sad, isn't it, Tom?
No, it's a fabulous opportunity to do it.
Oh, that's a great
And in fact, if you see economically what they've done in Europe, it's an 80-20 rule. When you work on heritage buildings, it's an excellent way of employment. It's about skills and training and labor and investment. So it's a fabulous opportunity. It's not a negative. But we do have to take the leadership, and it's nobody's fault but ours.
I think Therese mentioned during her presentation earlier on that heritage, when you're talking about heritage, people focus European heritage. Their history is perceived to be so much richer and longer. So how do you compete with that?
I think it's also...
Another question?
This goes back a bit for a comment on the print media. I'm with the Milne Bay Memorial Library and Research Centre, but this is an article came out at the centenary of the start of the First World War. And an article lauded this gentleman for enlisting a day before the war started. Simple fact was he enlisted in the 3rd of September. The war had already been going a month. If he had have enlisted on the 3rd of August, he could have enlisted in the militia. But the paper is lauding as he's keen. So he's got him enlisting in an army that doesn't exist because the RAF wasn't gazetted for several more, at least a week. The battalion he joined another several days. And this reporter is beating his chest that he's got it right. Now, to me, that's one of the reasons I don't buy newspapers anymore. And another reason, probably why you're not allowed to wrap fish and chips in newspapers anymore. Personal opinion.
No question. Being the media representative here, I think I can. I do speak to a lot of businesses and corporate, trying to help them understand media at this point. So I'll just briefly say that 24/7 news cycle at the moment. A lot of young journalists and they know a little bit about a lot of things. So you'll often find that experience. Don't let that colour your idea of the media. We're very useful. And you present your story in the right way, and you will get a lot of value from it. But I think most people have had that experience with a journalist from time to time. Can't trust them. Yes, Stewart. You can trust them.
I'd like to go back a little to a different topic before we get stuck in that one. And I'd like to just pick up something that Cameron said a little while ago when he was talking. I think your statement was something like, it's easy to get a grant for a 200-year-old building, but you can't get a grant to interpret a midden or something like that. Well, I'll challenge that and say, I can't get grants for 200-year-old buildings anyway. But what I guess from the topic today, in the future, what I'd love to see is there is a joint application between you and us, which talks about the interpretation of that midden and its relationship to the white fellas that were doing something in the natural place over here, so that those things start to get connected. And I think the politicians can. It's a lot easier for them. It ticks so many boxes in one go. We all can benefit from that sort of approach.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done successfully over on Stratty was that there's a creek called Myora Creek, which or Kapemba as we know it, and it's got a 3,000-year-old midden site, and it's got accessible by the main road out to the point, and culturally it's been significant. Our families have used it for years, and now visitors were going there, and it was becoming eroded and basically overloved. And so we got a federal government grant to restore it, and now it's got interpretive signage about the environment, the flora, the fauna, the cultural aspects to it, and it's now at a stage where the cultural heritage sites are well protected, the environment's well protected, but the visitor experience is actually enhanced because now more people can access it, the signage is better, and to me it's been it's won a few land care awards and stuff like that, and that's where we're kind of going, okay, what's next? How do we want to do that and replicate that across all of Quandamooka country so that we create this global eco-cultural tourism destination that looks at the richness of the cultural heritage of the area and of the region. And if we can just start moving at that pace and start looking at that, I think there's real opportunities for everyone.
Okay. Another question up here.
John Elliott from the Winton Shire Council. Just a general question. How do we make heritage tourism attractive for younger people? Because like in 10 years, most of the grey nomads are going to be dead and we won't have an audience. Seriously. If we don't attract if we don't attract younger people to come to our tourist destinations and the heritage destinations, if we don't think about that soon, we won't have an audience in the future.
Do you get many young people out to Winton?
Lots of foreign young people, hardly any young Australian people.
Okay. So we do have one program that you would be aware of out at Winton. We have a program where schools in Queensland can get support for taking students out to the outback.
It's a fantastic program.
Fantastic, yeah. So that's like your... No,
do? Okay.
It's like your compulsory sending the students out to the outback.
If you're lucky enough to be a tourism operator in Western Queensland,
yes,
the state government contributes $75 to each student that a school brings out, instead of taking them for their annual trip to Canberra. If they come to Western Queensland, the state government partly fund that.
And that's a project of Matt Braun, who is our regional director out for the outback, and it took him years and years and years and years to convince the 3 departments that it involves, that it's a worthwhile thing. And now we're getting people knocking on the door from particularly the far north saying, well, can you extend the boundary up to the far north because of how valuable it is. It's that sort of thinking we have to keep doing. It costs money though, and when you're looking at hospitals and roads and rates and all of those things, it's just another thing on top of the pile. But we do try as much as possible to extend the reach, and I think that's a fantastic example of one project that has actually worked.
What about the effect of the dinosaurs out Winton Way? Have you seen a lot more families bringing their children up?
Yeah, the whole dinosaur thing in Huon and Richmond and Winton certainly bring lots of younger families in particular to that area. It's funny, and it's almost like an Aboriginal thing that even city people feel connected to that part of the world, and we've just got to connect with them somehow.
One of the key research that I've heard is that if a child has a really good experience under 12, they'll always bring their families back. So as long as those families are coming and the children have a great experience, they will actually return with their families. So you might not get that 17 to 25 or, you know, that age group because you don't have anything that interests them. But you will get them coming back as families because they had such a great experience, you know, sort of before. So maybe that's the focus, is to make sure that the experience is talked about.
What about any other panellists? Have you any ideas about how to attract young people? Put on a music festival, a triathlon.
That's right.
I think it is about programming and participation and engaging, and whether or not it's through holding grandparents' days or something connects, you know, your cultural heritage organisation to them, whether they can do some, they can go to your venue and share an experience and it's positive and engaging. The chances are, as you say, that they will come back and it will be something that they treasure and remember fondly.
And you've got to be able to scale up, because look at Birdsville. You know, they had to be able to scale up to take 8,000 people for the race. So, you know, it's a week, it's full on pace for the rest of the year, but you have to be able to scale up.
One of the things I think we don't spend enough time considering is actually mementos. So the majority of the people driving through the outback are in the other side of their life, and they will buy, it is documented, they will buy presents for their grandchildren. And they don't buy presents if it's made in somewhere else than Australia, and they don't buy presents if it can't be authenticated. So we lose a lot of money because we don't make enough connections with our arts and cultural producers who are dotted out through the whole of Queensland, and we don't focus on the local arts and cultural produce in our museums and visitor information centres and everything else. And that's what people will buy.
But I think there's also, you know, that there's some organisations out there that are doing that incredibly well, but there's also a lot that need assistance in developing their merchandise to sell and how to present it in a way that's attractive. You know, they need some retail expertise to help them in that process.
Yeah, but I would be surprised if there's not an arts and cultural standout in every region. There's someone that you could all lean on to say, what should I do? How best should I produce? And whether it's a printmaker or a painter, or the one that sticks in my mind is up in Mount Isa, there's a group of Indigenous women who do paper making. And they did their art through an Arts Queensland grant where a paper maker from the Sunshine Coast went up and spent a couple of weeks with them and then went back over a period of a year. And their paper is just exquisite, and they pick the things, the leaves that go inside their paper from a particular significant area, and there's a great story, and I would pay $100 for it. It's beautiful. Would I ever wrap anything in it? No, certainly not fish and chips, but it's just that little connection that you get. It's something, and you've all got them. You've all got those arts and craft people sitting there. You just need to do the connection.
Therese, it's Kathy Treichel from Arts Queensland. Yeah, there are heaps, and they're getting better at it in terms of getting the products into either the visitor information centres or actually growing it even further. Places like Gurigan Arts Centre have taken it to the next level and getting national and international products being sold, certainly through events like Cairns Indigenous Art Fair, of which Cameron Costello is chair of the board, and places like that. In Arts Queensland, we've got partnership managers attached to all the tourism and events Queensland areas. So we've been travelling around speaking with artists and arts organisations to actually develop strategies and products for that. So everywhere we're talking about, you know, you talked about Charleville Cosmos Centre, immediately comes to mind the Indigenous perspectives that Jane's looking at, and the Indigenous public art associated with that culture, a culture that is actually bridging both non-Indigenous and Indigenous stories of the night sky. So I can't urge people enough to actually tap into their local arts and cultural development offices. I've got one sitting next to me from Croydon Council today who knows exactly what the council's on about gold, about Chinese settlement, about rail. They know what their authentic experiences are, and they can actually assist you if you're actually looking at working in those areas. So
Stewart, did you want to say something?
With just going back a little to young people,
yes.
There's a couple of things. First of all, from what I've been told, there's lots of graduates in related fields or students at university here that are in museums and things that can't get roles in Queensland and can't get experience, and being able to connect those people with some of the regional places that we have would be terrific, and I'm sure that's not new to Rebekah. But I've got teenage children, and they're a great litmus test for me about what works for them and what doesn't. And under lights at the moment, I just can't remember the name of that famous... There's the art gallery in Moorlambar that opened recently. You know, the lady...
Margaret Ollie.
Pardon?
Margaret Ollie.
Yeah. So we took our teenage children to that, and I was watching them to see what they're interested in, what they do. So we walked into this gallery with artwork all over the wall. The first thing they did was they went straight to the computer screens and started to draw on it like the artwork. But the thing that they remembered was the room, because it was authentic. For them, they were able to walk away with that. They took photos of it, and they don't take photos unless they're interested. And I thought that was a really interesting example about young people.
Of an authentic experience.
Yeah, even for that age group.
It resonates. That's great.
Yeah.
So is there another question? Thank you. Yes,
yeah, Therese, I think what would be great to come from today is if the word could go around to all of the RTOs that heritage tourism is now on the radar, and we need you to engage with the heritage community in your local area. I've just had a chat with a number of people over cups of tea and things like that, and they're not feeling very loved out there. So I think if it can definitely come from higher up in the department to say, yes, we need to make this happen. Now, there's some amazing resources that you've got for business, social media, marketing, identifying your target market, all aimed for your B&Bs and all that sort of stuff. So if there could be a little bit of work done on that to modify those for the heritage tourism sector, I think that'd be fantastic as well. So, I think if we could, push that out, I think that'd be really, really great.
There you go. Feedback 2 ways today. It's all good. Another question?
Well, following on from that, I'm new to Queensland and trying to get work in the sector, and it seems very obvious that there are lots of people doing lots of amazing things, and you need to be doing more of what you're doing today, which is talking to each other to find out what the opportunities are in order to help each other out. And so I think this is a great start. I don't know if it's actually the start, but anyway, do more of this, because I think this is the way that you're going to move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you for the feedback. Yes.
I agree, we do need to do more of this talking, but I was just interested in the panel's, Louise Bauer from Sunshine Coast Council. I'm just interested in the panel's opinion on the potential impact or engagement that might be offered through the Makers movement, the Makerspace movements, in context of heritage experiences, particularly in museums. That's resulted in a lot of participation from young people and actually being involved in crafting and making. And in a museum, there's lots of objects which could be a source of inspiration.
Anyone? Jane?
So the makerspace industry is about creating stuff. So it's 3D printers, it's often with technology, it can be with craft, but it is about participation and giving young people the opportunity to create stuff. And libraries are embracing this across the nation. I personally believe that young people now want to participate. They no longer want to just consume. So unless museums, art galleries, libraries offer opportunities for them to participate. And I loved George's participation with going on a dig. So within the day at Maryborough, you could actually go on an archaeological dig. So, being able to build into your programming and that's a makerspace, but it's just a different way of doing it, is about participation. So, I think a 3D printer now is $2,000. You can get your object designed. The kids can design the object from the museum and then print it out and take their own authenticated Queensland with their own signature on it, their own object home.
Wow. As we're just about finished, are there any final questions or observations? One last question here. Sorry. Okay. Just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Going back to the previous question, children's involvement, living history, like one of the greatest successes there is the Abbey Museum's medieval tournament, because the kids outnumber the parents, and it's incredible. And the first time I went there, I just was following this little girl. She was only about 2 or 3 years old, and as she was just about to walk around the corner, she saw this gypsy camp, and they're on their drums and highly colourful and what have you, and just seeing the sheer delight in her face was just, she just went ape. And yeah, so I think it's got to be participatory for them, but also you need to actually sort of like get the parents involved as well.
Got to get the parents involved because they're not going to take them otherwise.
Well, exactly. So,
thank you. Therese.
So one of the interesting things is storytelling, and you do it all very well, but it is the one thing that tourists are looking for. So when you sit down at a restaurant and you see a fish on your plate, the majority of tourists now don't want to know that it's a fish. They actually want to know that it's a parrotfish that's been caught off the island or that's been tenderly loved and brought to their plate. You tell stories better than anyone. So you have to go back to your heritage site and you need to look at the way you tell those stories, and you need to work out how you can best deliver that story, whether it is through a written piece or the similar thing that we've just seen up on the screen before. And that's what you then put on your ATDW page. So ATDW allows you to put up 4 pictures and several videos and lots of information. And that sort of stuff is what people will find, and that's what will draw them to your door. So you just need to re-look at how you present yourself, and you need to package yourself and sell yourself so that you become appealing, because people are going. It's just that they may or may not stop in your bit of town for an extra day because they don't know what you've got is so special. So rethink and link everything in. So don't have a Coles pie in your cafe. And that's directly aimed at a few people, but there are local producers who will make really good food locally, and that's what people want. They don't want cube cheese, because they can get cube cheese back in their home. They want something special. They want to know that that cheese was made down at the local dairy, and Tom is the person who has the cows. So rethink and repackage all of your stories and make sure you're presenting them in a way that people can access them.
Something they feel like they can't get anywhere else.
Absolutely. Or why would
that's
they bother?
That's right. Well, we might leave that. I'll hand back over to Jane, who can, I think, sum up and wrap up this event. But I'd just like to say thank you to our speakers. Stewart.
I just wanted to go to the next bit to say this has been, I congratulate the State Library for getting us to here, and Olivia for organising this. Has been a great opportunity and a great step forward, but I really wanted to talk about what do we do next. And we're all inspired now we've got to this stage, but it's really important that we do something else with this. And I think that there's lots of different components to this heritage tourism concept and idea and industry, and unless we start to tie those bits together now and find some leadership in amongst this, and Tom talked a lot about leadership, we need to go from here to the next stage.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much to our panellists. Thank you to all of our panellists today. I hope you've really enjoyed the experience.
Thank you, Stewart, because that's exactly, sort of where we have to head. And I think one of the key things that we've covered quite a lot of ground today. Mark told us we had to find our purple cow and make it sticky. So, you know, sort of we really need to think about a sticky purple cow. Tom told us that we really need to demonstrate our value to our stakeholders to gain investment. We don't go for funding. What we actually go for is investment in outcomes that we deliver. So we have to actually reframe our story and reframe our ask of whoever we want to invest in our projects. And we can only do that by looking outward. Therese told us that we have to tell the tourism Queensland about us. So we have to inform. We can't wait for Tourism Queensland to ask about us. We have to be much more active in telling our regional tourism operators. And yes, we can wait to be loved, but we can go up and say, you must love us as well. So take, you know, sort of that opportunity to tell the regional and the Queensland Tourism Board about us. George told us about building a narrative and, you know, the one ticket across a whole town. How innovative is that? That you don't have to go to 5 different places. Just one ticket gets you everywhere. Build that narrative around that one ticket and people stay longer, and build the participation within it. Playback showed us, and like it was a pilot project and was much more difficult than, you know, the project plan laid out. So it looked really easy when you presented it there, but it was a lot more involved in digitising old 80s cassettes. So, but we learnt from it, and, you know, you can present your story in different ways. And Cameron and Rory told us about building participation, that there's a real interest in engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, and I love Cameron's comment about integrating it into our colonial history. It's not just one history or the other, but it's a narrative and a whole narrative of country. Our placemakers and case studies told us it's all about the people. We have to understand who our audience is, who we are, and focus. It's not about doing everything for everybody. That our purple cow is our focus. And Qantas told us the Qantas Founders Museum was about diversifying. So they had a different focus because they're providing an experience for a whole community, and they took that leadership on board. So I think the keys from today are about collaboration, not competition. And collaboration means that we have to let our egos go. So it is about collaborating together. It's quite difficult in the cultural industry because, hey, it's all about us. It's all about our collections because that's what's important. But in reality, it's about the people who engage with the collections, and we have to look outward, not inward. It is about finding that financial sustainability through investment, not cost. So really reframing our whole attitudes to how we engage with our partners and stakeholders. So we need to be future focused. There is opportunities out there. There is hope. So, you know, sort of it is about a great opportunity to lead and work together. I want to thank our facilitator, Gillian Whiting, who's done a wonderful job, and now I'm coughing, but I won't blame that on you, Gillian. And I really think if we can keep the discussion going, so keep the hashtag going, so if you get thoughts, you know, sort of the hashtag Queensland Heritage Tourism, and I've had a futurist engage with this discussion as well, and he's had some quite interesting comments, so keep engaged with that discussion. It is significant that we all came today, that we came to a library, and we're from heritage, we're from tourism, we're from libraries, a whole lot of different industries today together. So let's make sure that we continue to be that champions of heritage. And hey, I want to say we are sexy. And if we believe it, everybody else will too. Thank you.
The final thank yous, thanks for coming, and just a reminder that the event will be available as a podcast from the State Library in the next week or so. And my apologies for the coughing, it's awful, I know, but thanks for persisting, and hopefully we will all see each other again at another event not too far in the future. Thank you for coming.